Good afternoon. Welcome to the Heritage Foundation. I'm John Hilbolt, Director of Lectures and Seminars. We welcome you and our online guests to our Douglas and Sarah Allison Auditorium. We, of course, ask everyone in-house if you'll be so kind to check that our various mobile devices have been silenced or turned off as we prepare to begin. For those watching online, you're welcome to send questions or comments to us at any time, simply emailing speaker@heritage.org. And of course, we will post today's program on the Heritage homepage for everyone's future reference. Welcoming our special guest is Salim Firth. Dr. Firth is a research fellow in macroeconomics in our Institute for Economic Freedom. Before joining us here at Heritage, he was a visiting assistant professor of economics at Amherst College and a visiting research scholar at Northeastern University. He earned a doctorate in economics from the University of Rochester. He also holds a Master's of Arts degree in economics from the University of Rochester and a Bachelor of Science, also in economics and international affairs from Northeastern University. Please join me in welcoming Salim Firth. Salim?
Thank you all for being here today. I'm very glad to be able to welcome you to the Heritage Foundation. We are committed to economic freedom, to prosperity, to civil society. So we are very excited about this event because that's what we are seeking in Puerto Rico across all sorts of lines. The Heritage Foundation has been engaged in the question of how to restore growth and prosperity in Puerto Rico over the past few years. And you know, our interests, our goal is to expand economic freedom and maintain rule of law for the sake of everyone involved. That doesn't always make everybody happy. Rule of law, for instance, does not always mean that bondholders get paid. Economic freedom does not mean that every business succeeds. As some of you are very keenly aware, Heritage Foundation was skeptical of the Promesa bill that came out of Congress last year, which sort of has created the framework within which negotiations are taking place now. Today we are actually able to invite the sponsor of that bill, Representative Sean Duffy. He sends his regrets. Literally 10 minutes ago, got pulled into a high-level meeting in his day job. I don't know why he's so busy. But he sends his regrets, and we were proud to be able to welcome, even having key voted against this legislation, or our sister organization did that. We were proud to be able to welcome him and say we are all on the same team. We're working for prosperity and opportunity for everyone who lives in Puerto Rico. And even if we disagree sometimes on the process of how to get there, we are being guided by the same star. We do, however, have in-house the man who has the hardest job in politics, Governor Ricardo Rossello. Very, very proud to have the opportunity to welcome the governor to the Heritage Foundation. Really pleased with the ambition and energy that he's brought to what I think is the hardest job in politics. So one of the criticisms that we had of Promesa was that it did not sufficiently emphasize economic reform. It was a very debt process and budget-focused bill. And we said again and again, loudly and clearly, you can fix the budget and you can renegotiate the debt, but if you don't reform the economy and the way that the government interacts with the citizens in the private sector and in the social programs, you aren't going to get long-term prosperity. And I'm very pleased with the understanding that Governor Rossello has of those principles. He's going to get to talk about in detail some of the things that his administration has done and is aiming to do. They're coming up on 100 days, as is another administration in this area. And two things that really impressed me that have already been done. So we're not in the ambition category here, we're in the accomplishment category. The first was a labor reform law that, you know, in a very short version, I think it moved Puerto Rico's labor laws from being kind of like France to being kind of like the rest of the US. And you know, we know what the results of European-style labor laws are. And I would point out, so some of you picked up the paper of mine that was outside, Puerto Rico has a far lower share of its income going to hired labor than any state in the union. So it's not as if these, dirigistes labor laws were helping workers. The result on the ground was that Puerto Rico had an extremely low share of income going to workers, and with reform and prosperity, that will change and grow. The second one is one-stop construction permitting. This is a huge deal. It only came out this month. We'll see results as we go forward. But we're all very well familiar. The World Bank does this, doing business survey, and Puerto Rico on the difficulty of starting a business, building a warehouse, right, a very simple business activity, was just down in the dumps globally, far, far behind the mainland U.S., which they measure in New York and L.A. And so this change will let you get all the permits that you need to build a building in one spot, online, and construction is 1/2 of capital investment, right? 50% of capital investment is just simply buildings. And to be able to build those quickly, attract investor money, have clarity about what you can do if you want to invest in the Puerto Rican economy, that is the kind of thing that creates growth. So very happy about that. My message to the governor today is don't rest on your laurels. These are two really good steps. You've taken others you'll talk about. Keep going. Keep the energy up. Today has almost convinced me to be an optimist, but mostly I'm a pessimist. And it comes with the professional territory. But mostly I'm a pessimist on Puerto Rico. I think that it will take a shared sense of urgency and concerned effort by all parties and all sectors, plus some good luck, to restore prosperity and growth to Puerto Rico. So I'm rooting for everyone there, but I don't take this challenge lightly. This is not the kind of thing that is going to be fixed in 100 days, maybe not even in one administration. But we're seeing steps in the right direction, and I want to hear more about those. So let me introduce our keynote speaker today, although he needs no introduction. Ricardo Rossello was sworn in as governor of Puerto Rico on January 2, 2017. Rossello holds a PhD in bioengineering and neurobiology from the University of Michigan and a bachelor's degree in chemistry and biomedical engineering with a specialization in development economics from the good university in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He was a postdoc at Duke University and went on to work as a professor at the Metropolitan University and as an adjunct professor at the Medical Sciences campus of the University of Puerto Rico. He became the youngest member of the Ibero-American Culture and Scientific Academy, and his work has been published in several scientific journals, such as eLife, and he was even on the cover of the prestigious Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. I should say, he does sound very smart, but on the other hand, he decided to run for governor, so you have to weigh these things. In 2012, Rossello published the book Un Mejor Puerto Rico es Posible, which analyzes how the island's situation under its current political system affects both the social and economic parameters of Puerto Rico and its relationship with the rest of the world. Facing the 2012 status plebiscite, Rossello founded the movement Boricua Ahora Es, encouraging the Puerto Rican electorate to vote for statehood. He's married to Beatriz Isabel Rossello, who I was very pleased to get to meet this afternoon. And they have a 2-year-old daughter, which makes them wonderful people. Thank you very much, Governor.
Thank you. Sounds like that introduction was written by my mother. Thank you, including the not being too smart after running for office. First, let me say, for those of you that might be questioning, no, I am not the junior staffer of the governor. I am actually the governor of Puerto Rico, and I am very excited to be here today. I want to embark on a little bit of a journey today with you, and talk a little bit about the recent history of Puerto Rico. What we saw was happening, what was done or what was not done, what our aspirations were as we ran for office, the transition period that ensued afterwards, a little bit over 100 days now in office and what we've executed, and then the title of this conversation, which is A Path Forward for Puerto Rico.
So let me just start by answering why I decided to run for office. You know, as a scientist and somebody that loves my people and that loves my island, I started seeing a lot of things that weren't going in the correct path. I started seeing a lot of decision-making that really wasn't backed by any evidence or by any logical process. And at one juncture, I looked upon the whole scenario and said, you know, I either stay on the sidelines and look at what's going on, or I take action, run for office and start being part of this decision-making process. So that's what we decided to do. Somewhere around 2013, we embarked on a process that we called a plan for Puerto Rico. And the notion was very simple. Why don't we lay the foundations of what the current status and what the current situation in Puerto Rico is? Why don't we determine what the challenges are, and then why don't we start finding reasonable and executable solutions to those problems? So during that journey, you know, I learned a lot, and my colleagues learned a lot, and we got a lot of help from different professionals and people that wanted to help Puerto Rico. And we started seeing the elements that were driving Puerto Rico to have a fiscal collapse and to have an economic collapse. We started seeing how government was significantly bigger than other jurisdictions similar size and in the United States relative to Puerto Rico. We started seeing how spending was uncontrolled and there was no accountability and, quite frankly, no transparency within the spending and within the actions that were going across government. We started seeing how, you know, the government wanted to do a lot of things, but the end result was they couldn't execute many of them. And then we started setting aside what were, I think, the pillars of our vision for Puerto Rico. Now, fast forward to sometime 2015, I decided to launch my campaign and my candidacy for governor of Puerto Rico. At that point, you know, I had to make an introductory speech, and I had several interactions with the media. And I decided to talk about only one issue, which I thought was a critical issue that was limiting growth and opportunity in Puerto Rico. And it was the fact that our government was too big, that we have a government that has 131 agencies, and that there is no accountability for spending. I started talking about how I wanted to reduce that government from a 131 agency structure to about a 30 to 35 agency structure. Of course, all of my advisors started to cringe immediately when I said that. But it was important for me to establish what I thought were the problems in Puerto Rico and what I thought was a solution and a path forward for our island. So the next year and a half, most of the conversation centered about the policies that we were going to execute in order to have a government that can have the tools to reduce spending, to be more fiscally minded, and to focus some of the resources on social and economic growth. Fast forward to 2016, there was a game-changer event in Puerto Rico and in Washington, which was the implementation of a fiscal oversight board and the powers that the law of PROMESA provide this board. Now, this happened in the last couple of months of the previous administration. During that time, that previous administration had the opportunity to submit a fiscal plan for 10 years for Puerto Rico. The Fiscal Oversight Board received that plan, and they did not certify the plan. They gave that government an opportunity to reshuffle the deck and see if they could propose another plan. They did not do so. So all of these things were occurring as I was campaigning for the job, and as I was mindful of a lot of the policies that we had to implement for Puerto Rico because they were part of our commitment for Puerto Rico. Given the opportunity to serve as governor, we had another commitment for our people, and it was we were going to focus on a lot of the changes we needed to do on the first 155 days of our administration now. I know it sounds like an odd number. We typically measure things by the first 100 days. But what we said and what we realized was that our situation was very different. It was very particular. It called upon for us to not only take action when we swore oath in office, but it called upon us to take action the minute we won the election. So those first 55 days were the transition period of our administration. And our commitment to the people of Puerto Rico was to find clarity, to get some transparency, to figure out how deep the rabbit hole goes in terms of the fiscal problems and find out some of the solutions that needed to ensue. So as we went through that process, we gave that to the people of Puerto Rico. We identified how deep the rabbit hole went. It was a big number. It was bigger than many expected. But at least we had clarity and we had a path forward. During that time, I started looking for some of the men and women that were going to make our cabinet and having conversations about their commitment to execute and their commitment to excellence, and establishing the real fact that we were going to have to cut expenditures in Puerto Rico if we were going to have a path forward, that we were going to have to start consolidating some of the agencies so that we can have a slimmer, leaner, more effective government, that some of the people I appointed might not have a job after that process ended because there was not going to be a need for that position anymore. And I was very lucky to find men and women that were very committed to doing that precise effort. January 2nd, 2016, I swore oath at 12:01, just right after midnight. And a little bit after that, I signed 4 executive orders, all directed towards having fiscal responsibility, towards identifying a situation of emergency in Puerto Rico that we had to tackle, and that went to executing immediate tasks so that we can start reducing the expenditures and having some accountability in Puerto Rico. Those included implementing a zero-based budgeting approach in Puerto Rico, reducing 20% of our political appointments, which I'm happy to say we're well above that reduction rate, reducing the excess in contracting in Puerto Rico, and even so, reducing the current budget that was ensuing by 10%. So those actions we took on the very first day in office, and we followed suit by submitting 10 new bills to the legislature so that we can have a quick path forward for Puerto Rico in the next coming 100 days. The results after that have been the following. We've been able to pass 22 laws in Puerto Rico, more so than any jurisdiction in the United States at that juncture. 7 structural reforms. Salim stole my thunder and already told you 2 of them. But 7 structural reforms that would directly affect what the fiscal landscape was and that would allow us to push forward in terms of economic growth. We also had the challenge of producing a fiscal plan in 58 days that would be certifiable and that would come from the government of Puerto Rico as opposed to a non-elected board. We also had and continue to have the challenge of sitting down with our creditors and renegotiate the terms of those credits in good faith. We also had to go in to all of those 131 agencies and see what the runoffs, the expenditures were, start putting some controls, creating task force, and getting groups together that would actually execute what the policy was. So in those first 100 days, we were able to accomplish a lot, but I second your opinion, Salim. We still have to do a lot more. On the economic front, our commitment with Puerto Rico was to drive forth 4 structural reforms that would enable us to create an ambience that would state that Puerto Rico is open for doing business. The first one was the labor reform law in Puerto Rico, something that was talked about for decades in Puerto Rico, but that was never executed. We were able to execute it within the first 30 days of our administration. Second one, permitting law, a modern permitting law, something that needs to be evident, that is necessary for growth, is for investors and people and stakeholders to know that if they want to grow in Puerto Rico, they will have a path forward as opposed to obstacles. So we designed a policy that would ensure we use the best technology available, that would centralize all of the information, that would simplify the requirements of the permitting, and that would enable immediate permitting should you have an engineer or an architect that would validate these approaches. Right now, parallel to the federal government, we're looking at our third critical structural reform, which is a tax reform. And in this sense, our objective is very simple. Puerto Rico, we have very high evasion rates. And typically the strategy has been increasing the rates. Increasing the rates only puts a higher burden on those that are already paying. So what our strategy will be is to see if we can increase the base, identify evasion, establish protocols that make it easier for people to pay their taxes. And just recently, without even having to go through the legislature with this, based on pure execution, our Treasury Department was able to get over $60 million more in revenues than what they got last year and than what was expected, just on the single strategy of being more open to people. So there is an alternative to doing this, and our objective is clear. Let's widen the base, and let's reduce the rates so that we can make Puerto Rico a more competitive jurisdiction relative to other states and to other countries. And the fourth critical reform, which we're working diligently right now, it's an energy reform. As you know, in Puerto Rico, we have a monopoly-type system that's ran by the government where we have high rates and low reliability. And we aim to change that. We aim to change that with a collaboration with the private sector and stakeholders so that they can generate part of the energy at more competitive rates so that it is a benefit for the people of Puerto Rico and for the stakeholders that want to get involved in Puerto Rico. We also amended our public-private alliance law, which was already a gold standard within the United States, and we made it even slimmer and more effective than ever so that we can call upon those that want to invest in Puerto Rico to see the opportunities and to help our economy grow. I'm glad to state that just this past week, we had our first P3 summit, Public-Private Alliance Summit, whereby we had the participation of over 900 potential investors and looked at over 80 projects to be done in Puerto Rico. So, excuse me. So one thing is the legislation, one thing is the bill, the other thing is the action that our administration has taken so that we can achieve results. And we're very pleased and very confident that by seeing people from 24 countries come to Puerto Rico to evaluate the opportunities in areas of infrastructure, of energy, technology, and so forth, that they also see a new path forward and a new paradigm in Puerto Rico so that they can come and invest as well. We're also looking forward to externalizing some services and some critical services that we're doing in government in Puerto Rico. We've already started doing that. The promotion of Puerto Rico has been a task carried by the central government for the past years. It has been a problem to promote Puerto Rico, to say the least. Many of the people here and many of those watching at home might think that Puerto Rico is this tourist hotspot where we get a lot of tourism and where a large chunk of our economy is based on tourism. The reality is very different. Tourism only represents 6.5% of our economy. If you compare it to every other jurisdiction in our region, the average is about 17%. And one of the main problems we've been having is a coherent strategy for a long-term path so that we can promote Puerto Rico aggressively and that we can have a brand that is recognized everywhere else in the world. Every time a new government comes, a new brand comes with it. And that is just not sustainable. Secondly, we want to work with the industry that actually knows what it takes for tourism to flourish, to invest in the proper areas, to promote in the best regions so that we can get more bang for our buck. And we've externalized the promotion of Puerto Rico now to a destination marketing organization. We've done the same for the promotion of investment in Puerto Rico, establishing what we're calling Enterprise Puerto Rico, which will allow us to target those areas of industry and growth that can come to Puerto Rico and make sure we make it suitable for them to create jobs and opportunities in Puerto Rico. And now we're taking a long, hard look at the services we're giving in our government and seeing which one of those should be externalized to the private sector or should be externalized to the non-for-profit sector. Our view is the following. If there is a service, particularly if you have a government that is yielding over hundreds of services, but if there is a service that you can find in the yellow pages, you should really question if the government should be giving it. So we're on that path, and we're on that path now with a fiscal plan that a lot of people thought we weren't going to be able to get certified. 58 days for the new administration, a lot of challenges, a lot of work had to go in, but luckily we had been working in anticipation of this moment for the previous 3 years, looking at ways that we can cut costs but not affect growth in Puerto Rico, looking at ways where whatever we cut was not just to make ends meet on a snapshot basis, but would provide for a better or more effective government to ensue pushing forward. So this fiscal plan was certified, and now we're using it as part of the strategy in order to right-size government. We have to make significant reductions to enhance some of the revenues in different areas where are necessary, and make sure that Puerto Rico is in a path forward to a sustainable government. 131 agencies is not sustainable. Borrowing uncontrollably is not sustainable. Intergovernment borrowing, as was occurring in Puerto Rico, is not sustainable. We need to change the paradigm, and we need to give some clarity and some transparency to what's occurring in Puerto Rico. So now we're tasked, and our team is tasked, making sure that we can execute this plan. Recently, we submitted bills to our House and to our Senate that will ensure that we can implement some of these strategies so that more onerous strategies won't have to be implemented in their place. We're confident that the work that we've done so far will lead a path, yes, to changes, to reduction in government, but overall, a path in the mid and in the long term to economic growth and to prosperity and to opportunity for all in Puerto Rico. And now, as I stand here before you, we have a great deal of challenges ahead of ourselves as well. We are currently in a position to renegotiate the terms of our debt with our creditors. I can inform all of you that these conversations are ensuing and that we are hopeful that, as we did with the previous credit in the PREPA deal, we will be able to reach agreements with our creditors so that we can move forward in Puerto Rico. These conversations are ensuing and are part of the critical pieces that are still missing so that Puerto Rico can find its way forward. Lastly, I would say that it is now within this structure that we have set aside, we have a change in narrative in Puerto Rico. Before, the idea was to spend away, to borrow, and to come to Washington to get a bailout. Our narrative is different, and it is important for everybody over here to understand that. It is not the same narrative. Our narrative is we're going to put controls, we're going to work with a solid plan, and we don't want bailouts. But we do need collaboration from the federal government so that we can have a runway to execute many of the policies and many of the challenges that we have in Puerto Rico. One said challenge is in the healthcare front. Right now, Puerto Rico has a lower per member per month cost than the average of the cost in all of the states in the United States. As a matter of fact, it's 3 times lower than that of any other state in the nation. And yet we've been able to work with this model, provide services for the people of Puerto Rico, recognizing that we don't have equal treatment in this funding. Now, with the changes that are ensuing, right now there is a question if Puerto Rico will get some funding or not. There have been efforts so that we can argue that this is not a bailout. This is what was allotted to Puerto Rico in the first place and what is needed for us to have a runway in the next year so that we can execute certain changes to our health industry in Puerto Rico. Within the next year, we're going to implement strategies that will reduce spending in healthcare at a rate of about $300 million, which include detection of fraud, reduction of administrative costs, rationalizing of drug benefits, and so forth. And at the same time, we're also proposing a novel concept, a new model for Puerto Rico that will provide more options to the patients, that will allow us to reduce cost significantly, and that will allow us to also have better oversight of providers in general. I'm pleased to announce that just yesterday, we had a meeting with Secretary Price and with Administrator Seema Verma, and we talked about all of these aspects. And later in the afternoon, we received a letter from Secretary Price after we had the conversation, stating that he understood that Puerto Rico needed these funds in order for us to have the framework to have a sustainable healthcare system. And this is a critical point. We're not coming to Washington to ask for money just because we need a little bit extra. This capital is the difference between us having the capability of having a system that can work, that can get to the next year, or having the system collapse because we don't have enough funds to negotiate the terms with our MCOs and our providers. So this is a critical decision that will ensue in the coming weeks in Washington. And we implore the support of all of the stakeholders, recognizing that although it is a situation that is critical in Puerto Rico, it has a significant effect on the states as well. A collapse of the healthcare system in Puerto Rico would provoke an even greater massive exodus to the states, where that citizen is going to cost that state 3 times as much of the same federal dollars that would be used in Puerto Rico. So I would just ask everybody to see where we're headed with Puerto Rico. I would challenge anybody to find a more fiscally aggressive agenda anywhere else in the nation. I would challenge anybody to find a more aggressive agenda in terms of the bills that we're proposing and the reforms that are ensuing. And now we have a path forward, and we still have many questions that need to be answered. Questions on the taxing side, questions on the healthcare side, and questions on the definition and on the ultimate political status of Puerto Rico. And this is a critical juncture in our history. We are now establishing a first plebiscite that we're asking to be a federally supported plebiscite for Puerto Rico so that we can finally decide what the appropriate platform to push forward would be for our people. I support statehood. I support statehood because not only do I think it's the best solution for the people of Puerto Rico, I think Puerto Rico would make a great and wonderful ally to the United States as well. I support statehood because as an American citizen, I cannot fathom that we're in the 21st century and that the nation of liberty, of opportunity, of freedom still has a colonial territory within its grasp. And more importantly, you should know that Ronald Reagan also supported self-determination and also supported statehood should the people of Puerto Rico choose that. And we should aspire to have a nation that can open opportunities for all of its citizens, not just some, but for all of its citizens, that would enable us to get a better economic growth in Puerto Rico, that would enable us to participate more effectively with the other states, with the rest of the nations. And this is a critical path forward. And, I've talked a lot about policy. I've talked a little bit about statehood. But I will end my conversation and have answer your questions with one story that just happened last week. As I was leaving my office, I get a phone call from a lieutenant that's stationed in Syria that was coming to Puerto Rico. Already 3 tours under his belt, much younger than what I am. And he wanted to come visit me. He said he wanted to give me a gift. My calendar, as you can imagine, has been a little bit complicated, but we found a way. And I received the lieutenant, his young wife, and his mother. And to my surprise, this lieutenant, who was working for the U.S. Air Force, came to me with a flag that he had flown on November 8th, same day of the elections, over Syria for a period of 12 hours. A flag he flew because he had the hope that he could sometime bring it over to Puerto Rico and give it to its governor. And as he was giving me this flag, and as I felt proud as hell of his achievements and what he was doing for our country, he told me something that shocked me initially. He said, you know, I had to leave Puerto Rico, the land that I love, because I couldn't find opportunities. I had to go elsewhere. And this is how I eventually ended up where I am right now. And some people might even think I was betraying Puerto Rico. And I stopped them then and there. I said, you're not betraying anybody. You are our pride. We're very proud to have people like you that while we enjoy freedoms, while we enjoy liberty, you are fighting for those abroad, knowing of the dangers and the challenges that lie ahead, and knowing that he was going for another tour just a couple of days after that. So he told me, gave me the flag, and he said, please work hard so that I can vote for my commander-in-chief. Please work hard so that I can have the opportunity to come back to Puerto Rico and raise my family here and have opportunities here as well. I told him that my expectation was that the next time I would see him, he didn't have to bring another flag. He would just have to bring a star, and that we would sew that 51st star into that flag together. Please, please, don't let me fail the lieutenant on his wishes. Allow us to have a path forward so that the people of Puerto Rico can decide. Allow us to have a path forward so that we can, as U.S. citizens, keep working for this nation, but as part of the United States, if our people so choose to do so. Please allow us to have the opportunities, to have the runway, and let me let you all know that you're going to have a government that's committed to executing, that we have shown that we have the will, the political will, that we have the energy, that we want to make changes, and that in the coming days, more changes are yet to come. Given that opportunity, I can safely say that the best for Puerto Rico is yet to come. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Governor. I'm sure there's a lot of questions in this audience. We have time to take a few. My colleagues have microphones. I'm going to recognize questioners. If I've pointed to you, wait for the mic to arrive. Please identify yourself and any affiliation, and keep your question to a question. So, questions.
Good afternoon, Governor. My name is Jesus Colon. I'm a student of the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras campus. First, thank you for being here, also the leadership of the island. My question is related to the university. As you know, the University of Puerto Rico is currently passing through one of its most critical moments in history. How will the government address its fiscal and structural problems, keeping in mind the best interests of its students, professors, and its employees?
Well, it's a good and important question. As part of our fiscal plan, it was established by the Fiscal Oversight Board that the university had to have reductions of $450 million. That's, of course, scaled away in the first couple of years. It's a lot less than that, but still, it'll eventually amount to that quantity. So here's what we've done. Number one, I've recognized as a former university professor myself that in order for universities to work, you really need to honor the autonomous part of being autonomous, having an autonomous university. In the past, that hasn't been the case, and we all know. I stated before I was elected that I was not going to interfere with that autonomy. So the path forward with this fiscal oversight plan and the requirements that have ensued is that, it is currently the responsibility of the interim president and of the university board to produce a fiscal plan to achieve, those savings. But we haven't stopped there. Our government has made itself available and its resources available so that we can find better solutions for the University of Puerto Rico. I've emitted an executive order that provides for certain services from the central government that can be given by the university so that anywhere from $50 to $100 million can be generated for the university. There's about 5 other strategies that we have employed that would produce $209 million of additional income to the university. But we didn't stop there. We opened the doors to the students to hear their proposals. And the students brought their proposals with them. And I have to say, many of those proposals were very good. So we established a commitment with our legislature to help and produce and make sure that those initiatives that were, authored and championed by the students, we could pass them through the legislature so that we can get additional income to the university. So right now, it's a couple of days away from the deadline to submit the fiscal plan for the university. I will reiterate my position. My government is here to help. We're here to find ways to make look for more revenues for the university. We are committed to executing. As a matter of fact, the executive order is not just a piece of paper. I've actually conducted several meetings with our agency heads so that we can have the rubber meet the road, and we can have these services actually be executed by the University of Puerto Rico. And we've worked so that the tech transfer office in the university, which hasn't been very effective, could actually work together with the Science Trust and have another revenue source in that front. So it is a challenging time for all Puerto Ricans, no doubt. And my commitment to the university, to its students, is that we will have an open door policy in our government. We will hear all of the proposals. We will look for those revenue sources, and that we are willing to help in any way we can find efficiencies. But of course, observing always that higher education and the quality of higher education is critical to our success.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Governor.
Thank you.
My name is Kevin McClintock. I'm the president of the Puerto Rico Statehood Students Association. My question is, in 2012, we have a plebiscite in which statehood won, but due that we had an incoming pro-status quo government, those results weren't really lobbied for in Congress. How are we going to ensure that the results of the plebiscite on June 11th are recognized by the U.S. Congress and the President of the United States?
It's a great question, and that's part of the reason I'm here. I'm happy to state that yesterday we had a meeting with the Department of Justice. Just for background reference, there was a quantity, a $2.5 million quantity earmarked for a process in Puerto Rico that would make the first federally mandated plebiscite in Puerto Rico possible. We've had interaction with the Department of Justice in the past. They've made some recommendations on things that they thought we needed to change. We took all those recommendations, and now we're back at the DOJ with that amended plebiscite and with the openness to see what things we need to change so that we can offer the people of Puerto Rico its first ever federally mandated plebiscite. So how can we make this happen? Well, if we ensure that this process is seen transparently, if we ensure that we can give a path forward for opportunity, as Reagan asked for in the past, that Puerto Rico could have self-determination and the federal government can abide by this process, then this process would be different altogether. It would be the first time that the federal government puts its hand in this process. It would be an opportunity for the people of Puerto Rico to vote between the clear alternatives, and that alternative should be then, and that choice should be respected by the United States Congress, seeing as democracy is a critical guiding force in our in our system. So I fully expect that we are going to have that binding process, and once we have it, I can assure you that there will be a government in Puerto Rico for the next coming years that will make sure that that will fight for the will of the people of Puerto Rico, that will not ignore the will of the 3.4 million people that reside in the island, and that will commence the transition to a adequate platform for Puerto Rico.
I believe we have time for one more question.
My name is Carla Moondry. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, government affairs consultant here. My question is, your government has relied a lot on P3s to reduce cost and spur private investment. Do you think that's a model that the whole country should be adopting?
It is. I think it's a great model. It needs to be done well. I mean, it's failed in some jurisdictions, and I think the great opportunity with Puerto Rico is that it has had success. So having an airport be a P3 is not a trivial process. It's complex, and it has failed in other places. In Puerto Rico, it's been successful, and it's precisely, I feel, because we have a robust legal framework for it to ensue. And now I hear other states, other cities that are looking forward to push forward this model, but they still don't have the legal framework. And what I would advise is for everybody that's considering this path forward to consider that legal framework. And again, I see a wide number of opportunities in Puerto Rico for P3s in the infrastructure side, but for P3s in the services side as well. And I will reiterate my point that it's the great opportunity to see if those services, if you can find them in the yellow pages, you need to ask yourself if the government should be yielding those services.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking the governor.
Thank you.